This is the book of 2 Peter, chapter 3 and verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burnt up.
President Vladimir Putin announced on Sunday that the Kremlin had successfully tested a new invincible, nuclear-capable, and powered cruise missile with an alleged unlimited range. Putin touted the test of the supposed Doomsday weapon, known in Russia as the Burevestnik missile, claiming it was invincible and capable of bypassing all current and future missile defense systems. In a video released by the Kremlin, Putin, dressed in military fatigues, instructed his country's top generals to start preparing the missile for potential use.
Речь идет о испытании крылатой ракеты неограниченной дальности «Буревестник» с ядерной энергетической установкой. Знаю, что у меня есть доклад со стороны промышленности, в целом известные оценки Министерства обороны. Это все-таки уникальное изделие, которого в мире ни у кого нет.
According to Putin's chief of the general staff of Russia's armed forces, Valery Gerasimov, the latest test of the missile flew in the air for 15 hours and covered a distance of about 8,700 miles, easily capable of reaching New York City or Washington, D.C. Little is actually known about the missile, which some have dubbed Flying Chernobyl. According to a 2019 report from the Nuclear Threat Initiative, the subsonic cruise missile is designed to be powered internally by a miniature nuclear power plant, enabling it to fly farther and for longer at a speed less than the speed of sound. The Burevestnik, which in English translates to announcer of the storm, could conceptually stay in the air between 24 and 48 hours. If it were to be tactically launched, the missile would carry a nuclear warhead and circle the Earth at a low altitude to avoid missile defense systems. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a Russian military journal suggested the missile could fly as far as 12,000 miles and would hover at an altitude between 160 and 300 feet throughout its flight to evade air defenses.
This is the book of Malachi, chapter 4 and verse 1. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch.
It starts with a blinding flash. No sound, no time to run, just light, hotter than the sun. In a heartbeat, a city disappears. Concrete turns to vapor. Shadows burn into the ground. That's the power of one modern nuclear warhead. Now, imagine 12,000. 9 nations hold them, hidden in silos, submarines, and bombers. Each one built to erase entire civilizations. They're not weapons, they're extinction machines. Let's open their arsenals and see what happens when each one detonates above an enemy city. A 9-axle transporter rolls down a lonely highway, a 3-stage missile sealed in a canister on its back. In minutes, it can be unmasked, pointed, and gone. A weapon built to make the sky unpredictable. This is the Hwasong-18, North Korea's first solid-fuel ICBM, faster to launch, easier to hide, and designed to survive a first strike. Solid propellant changes the whole calculus. Unlike older liquid-fueled missiles that need hours of fueling and support vehicles, a solid-fuel Hwasong-18 can sit ready, move on roads, and be concealed among civilian traffic, shortening warning time and complicating any attempt to preempt it. Flight tests in 2023 validated long-range, lofted trajectories and showed the potential to reach the continental United States. Now, imagine a hypothetical Hwasong-18 warhead. For illustration, we'll use about 300 kilotons, detonating over Chicago. The scene is sudden and merciless. The initial fireball would gouge out a roughly 1 to 1.2 kilometer diameter crater at ground zero, vaporizing everything inside. A devastating blast overpressure that collapses most reinforced buildings would radiate to about 3.8 to 4 kilometers, turning dense neighborhoods and parts of the central business district into rubble. The thermal pulse, searing heat able to cause fatal third-degree burns and spark widespread fires, could extend to roughly 6 to 7 kilometers, setting whole blocks alight. Deep beneath the ocean's skin, inside the quiet hulls of France's Triomphant-class submarines, sleeps a missile designed to make nations think twice. Meet the M51.3, the latest evolution of France's sea-launched ballistic missile, now declared operational and built to keep Paris's oceanic nuclear deterrent relevant for decades. The M51.3 brings improved range, accuracy, and penetration aids, and is reported to carry the latest French oceanic warhead, the TNO family, in its upgraded form. Now, imagine a single M51.3 warhead. For this scenario, we'll use a representative approximate 100 kiloton TNO class yield, detonating over Moscow. The fireball would rip open a roughly 0.7 to 0.8 kilometer diameter zone, vaporizing everything at ground zero. A devastating blast overpressure sufficient to collapse most masonry and concrete structures would radiate out to roughly 3 to 3.5 kilometers, turning neighborhoods into flattened rubble. The thermal pulse, capable of causing third-degree burns and igniting widespread conflagrations, could reach about 5 kilometers, starting fires that would race through an urban tinderbox. Moderate blast damage and shattered windows, enough to collapse fragile interiors and create lethal flying debris, would extend into the 8 to 12 kilometer band, threatening millions across a sprawling metropolitan area. Radioactive fallout carried by weather could contaminate lands tens to hundreds of kilometers downwind, crippling emergency response and creating long-term exclusion zones. A convoy rumbles down a remote highway, a canistered colossus riding on its back. This is the DF-41 or Dongfeng 41, China's newest road-mobile intercontinental ballistic missile, built for range, survivability, and to punch holes through defenses with multiple warheads. Open-source analysts place its reach at roughly 12,000 to 15,000 kilometers, and it's widely believed to be a solid-fuel, three-stage design capable of carrying multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. Mobility plus ambiguity is the strategic point. You can't be sure where they are until it's too late. Now imagine one DF-41 warhead. For illustration, we'll use about 300 kilotons, arriving over Los Angeles. The scene is brutal and quick. The initial fireball would gouge out a roughly 1 to 1.2 diameter crater at ground zero, vaporizing everything inside. A devastating blast overpressure that collapses most reinforced buildings would radiate out to about 3.8 to 4 kilometers, instantly turning downtown towers and dense neighborhoods into rubble. The thermal pulse, the searing heat that causes lethal third-degree burns and ignites widespread fires, could reach roughly 6 to 7 kilometers, torching wooden suburbs and setting whole districts ablaze. Moderate blast effects like shattered glass or structural damage would push well beyond, into the 10-plus kilometer band, endangering millions across the metropolitan area and suburbs. Buried deep beneath the American Midwest, in silent underground silos, lies a weapon that could end civilization in 30 minutes. And it's been standing guard for over half a century. This is the LGM-30G Minuteman III, the backbone of America's nuclear deterrent. It's old, yes, first deployed in 1970, but don't mistake age for weakness. Each carries a 475 kiloton thermonuclear warhead, over 30 times more powerful than Hiroshima's bomb, and can strike targets over 13,000 kilometers away, reaching them in under an hour. Now, imagine one detonating over Moscow. The fireball alone would stretch nearly 1.2 kilometers wide, vaporizing everything within it. The blast wave, moving faster than sound, would flatten most structures within a 4 to 5 kilometer radius. Beyond that, intense thermal radiation would ignite fires and cause third-degree burns up to 8 kilometers away. Within seconds, more than 1 million people could perish. Within hours, the city's infrastructure would collapse. Fallout would drift hundreds of kilometers, poisoning everything it touched. Hidden in the cold, dark depths of the ocean, aboard America's Ohio-class submarines, lurks a weapon so powerful it can erase entire nations without ever being seen. This is the UGM-133A Trident II D5, the most advanced submarine-launched ballistic missile on Earth. Each of the 14 active Ohio-class submarines carries up to 20 Trident II missiles, and each missile can be armed with up to 8 W-88 or W-76 thermonuclear warheads, giving the U.S. Navy a total of nearly 280 deployed Trident IIs. Each warhead can unleash between 100 and 475 kilotons of destructive power and strike targets more than 12,000 kilometers away with pinpoint precision, accurate to within 90 meters. Now, picture one W-88 warhead detonating over St. Petersburg. The fireball would span 1.2 kilometers, vaporizing everything within. The blast wave would flatten concrete structures within 5 kilometers, and the thermal pulse would ignite fires and cause third-degree burns up to 8 kilometers away. Within moments, over 1 million lives could be lost. The shockwave would roll across the Gulf of Finland. The radioactive fallout would blanket the surrounding region. A convoy melts into the morning fog, a canistered arrow on a heavy truck that could be anywhere or nowhere when the moment comes. This is the RS-24 Yars, Russia's road-mobile and silo-based MIRVed ICBM, built to survive, disperse, and put multiple warheads onto distant targets. Technically, the Yars is straightforward but dangerous, a solid-fuel 3-stage missile deployable from both road vehicles and hardened silos, with published ranges around 10,500 to 12,000 kilometers, and MIRV capability. Public reporting cites 3 to 4 warheads commonly, with some sources noting 3 to 6 as possibilities. Exact loadouts, yields, and operational doctrine are state secrets, which is precisely the point. Now, imagine one of those warheads arriving over New York City. For illustration, we'll use a representative approximate 300 kiloton warhead. The scene is immediate and apocalyptic. The fireball would gouge a 1 to 1.2 kilometer diameter crater at ground zero, vaporizing everything in its center, parts of Manhattan's core erased in an instant. A devastating blast overpressure that collapses reinforced buildings would radiate out to roughly 3.8 to 4 kilometers, flattening large swaths of Manhattan, parts of Brooklyn and Jersey City across the river, and crushing critical infrastructure. The thermal pulse, the searing heat that causes fatal third-degree burns and ignites widespread fires, could reach roughly 6 to 7 kilometers, torching neighborhoods, fueling conflagrations across dense urban blocks, and overwhelming any firefighting response. Moderate blast damage and shattered glass would push well into the 10-plus kilometer band, sending lethal debris across boroughs, knocking out bridges and tunnels, and crippling transit and port facilities. RS-28 Sarmat, Russia's super-heavy liquid-fueled ICBM, designed to carry massive payloads, MIRVs, and even hypersonic glide vehicles, is meant to be the capstone of Moscow's land-based deterrent. Public reporting about Sarmat's payload is blunt. Russia says the missile can carry up to 10 tons of payload and has been described in state sources as able to field up to 10 large 750 kiloton warheads, or many smaller warheads or glide vehicles, a flexibility that creates a terrifying upper bound for destructive power. Imagine one 750 kiloton Sarmat warhead arriving over Washington, D.C. Total vaporization at ground zero, about 1.2 to 1.5 kilometers in diameter. Everything at point-blank range is vaporized. Severe blast. Most reinforced buildings collapse, about 4 to 5 kilometer radius. Downtown districts and hardened structures in the core would be catastrophically damaged. Thermal pulse, lethal third-degree burns or mass ignition. About 7 to 9 kilometer radius. Intense heat would ignite fires across broad swaths of the city and torch wooden suburbs. Moderate blast and fragmentation, or shattered glass, structural damage, and lethal debris, about 12 to 18 kilometer radius. Suburbs, transit corridors, and critical infrastructure would suffer widespread damage. Fallout and contamination. Wind and weather would carry radioactive contamination tens to hundreds of kilometers downwind. Under a black Arctic sky, engineers once whispered about a weapon that would rewrite the meaning of invulnerable. Today, that whisper has a name: Poseidon 2M39, an autonomous nuclear-powered underwater drone Russia presents as able to travel thousands of kilometers and smash coastlines with a nuclear warhead. What makes Poseidon truly chilling isn't only disputed yield claims. Analysts argue from a few megatons to larger figures. It's the way an underwater nuclear detonation changes the battlefield. Imagine a single Poseidon detonating using a 50 megaton yield aimed at San Francisco. Total vaporization at ground zero. About a 5.8 kilometer radius. Everything at point-blank range instantly gone, about 11.7 kilometer diameter. Severe blast. Most reinforced buildings collapse. About 20.5 to 21.9 kilometer radius. Catastrophic structural failure across huge parts of the urban region. Thermal pulse, or third-degree burns and widespread ignition, is about 35.1 kilometer radius. Moderate blast damage, shattered glass, structural damage, and lethal debris, about a 55.6 kilometer radius. Radioactive contamination, base surge, and local water shock could render coastal zones unusable and pollute sea and shorelines for hundreds of kilometers downwind or downcurrent, depending on weather and currents. The oft-repeated tsunami narratives depend heavily on bathymetry and remain contested among experts. The world's most powerful weapons are armed and waiting. But what happens when someone finally presses the button? Watch the first hour of nuclear war and see how it begins.